There we have it, guys, the championship season coming to an end, and what a finale we have just seen unfolding in front of us. We're here today to pick through all the action, but as always, I want to get your guys' verdict on everything in the comments down below. We now have the 4 playoff spots confirmed coming into the final day. We already knew about automatic promotion and relegation, but we'll be touching on each of the matches, and coming out later in the week, I'll have my playoffs predictions for how I see those semi-finals unfolding. Without any further ado though, let's jump into these matches. Starting out with Birmingham up against Blackburn, it was Tony Mowbray standing out of Blackburn with all 3 points in this one, and 3 fantastic goals, it has to be said. 2 really high quality goals from Blackburn in the first half. Buckley absolutely lashes one in from outside the box, and then Brereton Diaz with quite a cultured finish from outside the box as well. 22 for the season for Brereton Diaz. In the second half, Pedersen himself had a nice solo goal for Birmingham, but ultimately their season ended in defeat, and the mood around the club I think was certainly reflected at full time with the sort of fans running on the pitch invasions, the protests and things like that. Coincidentally, Birmingham would have stayed up this season had it not been for any point deductions to Reading or Derby, but it would have been very dramatic on the final day. Birmingham would have stayed up thanks to goal difference if that 6-point deduction for Reading and 21-point deduction for Derby were both wiped out. For Blackburn, it means that they have finished this season in 8th place, which in the general context of this season, what was expected of this Blackburn side at the start of the year is not a bad year by any means. It was just expectations changed throughout a year and how they've sort of slumped in this second portion. But there's certainly a team there that Tony Mowbray has built up, and it's crucial that they get this next manager spot on, because there's certainly a semblance of a team there with Blackburn that could challenge for the top 6 next season under the right management. And it was party atmosphere in Bournemouth as they sealed their season off with all 3 points against Millwall. For Millwall, they knew going into this one that they needed to pick up all 3 points, and they were relying on slips from teams above them, and in the end that obviously didn't materialise that way. It was, despite Bournemouth already getting over the line, always going to be a big ask for Millwall in this one. Generally away from home, they've not been the most creative side on the road. They've scored less than a goal per 90 in their away games. It's really been their home form which has been keeping them up amongst the playoff picture for the majority of the season. But once again, Kiefer Moore being that guy coming on from the bench, lovely goal on the break, sort of gives Bilkowski the eyes and then slides it into his near post. But it does make you wonder how Bournemouth would have been in this second half of the season had Kiefer Moore not picked up that injury when he initially signed for them. You know, would it have been a much more smoother path for Bournemouth? And you know, they wouldn't have gone to that game needing to beat Forest to go ahead and secure it. Maybe they would have gone ahead and done so earlier, because what an impact he's had for Bournemouth in these recent matches. For Millwall, it just wasn't to be, but I think a good season overall, 9th in the Championship, within touching distance on the final day of a top 3 finish as well. I've seen pictures of full-time Jed Wallace looking quite emotional, more than likely to move on. What a player he's been there, and whoever he ends up at next season is getting an absolute bargain on a free transfer. But yeah, it just wasn't to be for Millwall on the final day. But for Bournemouth, they can go up to the Premier League laughing all the way. Only 2 points behind Fulham in the end as well, which is interesting. Going to be very interesting to see from Bournemouth's perspective which players they look to cut from this squad going up to the Premier League, and which players they would like to keep around, because it is quite a big, you know, bulky squad they're going up with, and you'd imagine they'd have to be quite cutthroat really with who they think is good enough to cut it in the Premier League next season. But good win for the Cherries to seal off the season there. And despite Derby having more of the chances and the ball in this one, it was Cardiff who ended their season with all 3 points, with Jordan Hugel's second half strike giving the Welsh side all 3 points to go ahead and secure an 18th place finish for them this time around. Jordan Hugel's goal being Cardiff's first and only shot on target throughout the afternoon. They managed to frustrate Derby for quite a large chunk of this one. Be interesting to see what happens with Jordan Hugill next season, because obviously he'll be going back to Norwich, who have, you know, recently been relegated, so they could find the use for him as maybe a bit of a utility striker for them next season, or he could end up elsewhere. 4 goals in the second half of the season for Cardiff whilst he's been out on loan there. Fair play to the Derby fans, it looked like a packed out stadium for this one, but wasn't to be on the final day. We're still awaiting any confirmation in terms of Kirchner's takeover actually going through, and the latest stumbling block that has popped up with this is the whole stadium ownership issue, which is the latest hurdle to go ahead and be tackled. So hopefully hopefully we get a little bit more clarity on this one in the next few days, although this feels like another situation which could continue to go on, unfortunately. Huddersfield ended their season with all 3 points, 2-0 against Bristol City. It seemed like a decent enough start from Bristol City, but as soon as Toffolo put Huddersfield ahead and they got that second one just before half-time, they were never going to come back in the second half. What's happened to Harry Toffolo recently, by the way? Absolute goal machine coming in from that left-hand side. Another lovely goal in this one. He's now scored 5 in his last 7, and you have to say that Huddersfield are really coming into the playoffs now as the form team at the moment. Obviously, heading into the final day, we already knew that Huddersfield had confirmed that playoff spot, but the interesting part about it was them leapfrogging Nottingham Forest, and so the opponents they'll face in the semi-final will be Luton Town, which I think is a really interesting one, and dare I say it, I think Huddersfield fans will be feeling pretty good going into that semi-final. Head-to-head record this season between those two does favour Huddersfield, but Nathan Jones up against Carlos Corberán, I think it's a really interesting battle actually. But what a season it's been for Huddersfield, 3rd in the Championship. Tomorrow I'll have my reacting to my predictions from the start of the video coming out, and boy did I get Huddersfield wrong at the start of the year, but they deserve immense credit for how this season's gone. They're carrying loads of momentum with them into the playoffs, and I think you'd be an absolute fool to go ahead and write them off at this stage. It feels like something special's happening at that football club, so fair play, lovely way to cap off the season, and they'll now be gearing up for their playoff campaign. For Bristol City, I'd be interested to know from City fans, out of the players that were in your starting 11 for this game, how many of them do you realistically see being there next season? Because it does feel like a bit of a reshuffle is coming, and ultimately this has capped off what has been a really disappointing season for them. And we have plenty of late drama unfolding at Hull, and ultimately this really influencing the playoff picture in terms of who each side's going to face in the semi-finals. Now, coming into this game, I think we were all expecting a little bit of a misshapen performance maybe from Forest when the team news actually came out. Steve Cooper decided to make 7 changes for this game, so we were never going to see a fully fluid Forest that we've become accustomed to seeing in this second half of the season, and the first half especially did look like quite a slow burning one. Nottingham Forest awarded the penalty though right at the death. Brennan Johnson sticks that away, sending the goalkeeper the wrong way. Looks as if Forest are destined for a 3rd place finish and a matchup against Luton in the playoff semi-final. Had it not been for Coyle cutting inside onto his left foot, whacking that ball into the box, and then Lewis Potter just getting the faintest of touches on it to take it away from Samba. Really clever positioning from Lewis Potter to just get away from his marker, ghost in behind the last man, and level it up at 1-1, ultimately meaning that Forest go into the playoffs against Sheffield United now, which is such an interesting clash, that one. I'm sure that, you know, both the City Ground and Bramall Lane are going to be absolutely packed out for those playoff semi-finals, and yeah, that really is a, you know, clash of the titans there. I cannot wait to see how that one goes ahead and unfolds. But for Hull, Lewis Potter's 12th goal of the season there. Excellent first proper full campaign for him at Championship level, and I mean, I think Hull will do an excellent job in keeping hold of him. I think there'll be plenty of interest coming in for Lewis Potter next season. But with Hull and the obviously new ownership and things, excited to see what sort of business they go ahead and do over the summer as well, because ultimately this season was all about survival in the Championship, and they've managed to do that without much of a scare in the second half of the season. And we saw Luton beating Reading by 1-0. Harry Cornick with the only goal to go ahead and settle this one. Nyland having an absolute nightmare. The first thing you're taught as a goalkeeper when you're putting the ball down is to check each shoulder behind you. But bit of clever play from Cornick to sneak in there, and that being enough to give Luton all 3 points. Ultimately, they would have got over the line without this 3 points, with both Preston and Bournemouth doing them a favour. But nice for themselves to get over the line, and sets up, like we were mentioning before, a really intriguing playoff semi-final up against Huddersfield. They were minutes away from a game against Forest in the semis, but that one against Huddersfield, yeah, I think it's quite a finely balanced one actually, which I'm very much looking forward to watching. In terms of Reading, I think their fan base will be glad this miserable season has come to an end. Fortunately for them in the end, of course, achieving survival, but if we were to wipe out both their and Derby's points deduction this season, Reading would have gone down this season on goal difference based on the points they've picked up throughout the season. I'm fascinated to see how they handle this summer in terms of who they give the reins to permanently next season. Interestingly enough, in terms of points per game picked over this season, Ince has marginally been better than Paunovic, which isn't saying a lot for me with how bad Paunovic was at times this season. So yeah, big rebuilding job on the horizon for Reading over the summer, but for Luton, what a job, what an achievement to get into the playoffs, and yeah, their story's not ended here. And what a way for Peterborough to go out in the end, smashing Blackpool 5-0 on the final day. Blackpool completely on the beach for this one, but taking nothing away from Peterborough's performance, and dare I say it, I do think that out of the three that are being relegated from the Championship right now, I'd be most positive of Peterborough's chances of immediately bouncing back next season. With Derby, there's still a lot of uncertainties over what their squad will be looking like next season and the current ownership issues. Barnsley, I think, will continue to have some struggles with the way that this season's unfolded. But with Peterborough, there is still a semblance of what could be a good squad, even at this level. We've seen Grant McCann get them competing since he's come in, but some brilliant individual performances in this one. Poku and Burrows on either side as the wing-backs were absolutely great in terms of offering that creativity throughout the afternoon. Jonathan Clark-Harris getting in on the axe, Sammy Smodics with a brace, and probably the pick of the goals going to Jack Taylor as well. 89th minute, a brilliant strike and a brilliant way to send off this season. But with a manager like Grant McCann, with this squad, if they manage to keep the majority of it together in League One next season, I'd be quite positive about Peterborough's chances at going ahead and bouncing back. For Blackpool, overall, you know, looking on the picture, it has been a very good season for them. Their first one back in the Championship, but an afternoon to forget in this one because they were completely woeful and well below par. But fair play to Peterborough, some nice football in this one. And then we saw my side, North End, absolutely dismantling Middlesbrough by 4-1. Now ultimately, with the results elsewhere, Middlesbrough winning this game would have had no influence on their season in terms of achieving a playoff finish. But with that still on the line going into this game for Borough, they were well below par in this one. And if anything, it looked like Preston with a side competing for the playoffs and still had something to play for. By far and away the better team throughout the whole 90 minutes. Preston for this one, it was Alan Brown with the opener. A little bit gutted that the second one goes down as an own goal because Emile Reese does so well in the build up to this one. The pick of the goals probably being Emile Reese's first credited one. Brilliant link up between him and Archer, and then a little dink over the goalkeeper, and obviously the penalty as well. It'll be a real shame if we don't get Archer back for next season, because it has felt like in these last couple of months especially, Reese and Archer have finally started to form a proper partnership together, you know. Before that, each of them would have moments, but it now feels like they're both in sync with each other. And I think that was particularly shown with our third goal of the afternoon. Borough obviously started the second half fairly well. Nice ball in from Dyke, stealing to Tavernier, and Everson did have to be kept on his toes with a couple of other saves in that second half, but North End pretty much had this game won at half time. We had 10 shots on target in this one, which is pretty shocking from Middlesbrough's point of view, but their midfield couldn't really get on top for this one. McNair was sent off after 73 for handball. But fair play to the Borough fans who did come. They packed out that away end at Deepdale, and it just wasn't to be for them on the day. This is all about them sort of having a bit of a refresh now, Borough, going into next season, where I would expect them to be up and amongst the playoff picture, you know, particularly if Wilder's still there and he gets all the pieces that he wants moving into next season, because it has felt like there have been a couple of areas that have just let Middlesbrough down at some crunch matches this season. But a brilliant way for North End to seal out the season. Paul Huntington getting his send-off as well. From our point of view, I think it would be a real shame if we don't see Seth Vandenberg, Daniel Everson or Cameron Archer in the North End shirt again, because they've been absolutely fabulous for us this season. And what a way for Sheffield United to go ahead and build some momentum up ahead of their playoff campaign as they smashed Fulham by 4-0. Now, maybe we should have seen this one coming. Fulham ultimately had nothing to play for, and they made plenty of changes coming into this game as well. Having said that, I'm sure there still will have been plenty of nervous Blades fans coming into this game, but Gibbs White settling the nerves after just 10 minutes, getting on the end of Ollie Norwood's cross. He then sit up and dive for Sheffield United's second, and there's no doubt in it for me, Gibbs White is Sheffield United's most important player. He absolutely makes them tick in the final third, and he's capable of producing moments of magic like we saw in this one. Sanderberger has Sheff United 3-0 up at half time, and Stevens wrapping it up with the fourth goal in the second half, and it sets up such an interesting playoff semi-final against Nottingham Forest. Both head-to-heads between those two this season have each ended 1-1, so really finely balanced in that sense, and it's been interesting really how how both Sheffield United and Nottingham Forest seasons have really matched each other. You know, in the first few months of the season under Jokanovic, Sheffield United were absolutely miles off the pace and they looked nowhere near a top 6 outfit. But fair play to Paul Heckingbottom, the momentum they've picked up in the second portion of the season, getting them over the line in the end. And I think it's a real 50-50, if I'm honest, that playoff semi-final against Nottingham Forest. I think it'll be 2 brilliant games to watch. Both stadiums will be packed out for each of the semi-finals. But yeah, Blades fans, how are you feeling going into that one? And Fulham, ultimately we've said all there is to say about them this season, and this game wasn't really a reflection on how good they've been throughout the majority of the season. We saw Stoke playing at a 1-1 draw with Coventry, but it was the away side who were well on top in this one. The first half especially, Coventry crafting out loads of chances. Victor Gyökeres, deservedly so, giving them the lead for, I think, his 17th goal of the season. Really good goal return for Gyökeres this time around. But I suppose in typical Coventry fashion, couldn't quite get that second goal over the line, despite the chances they continue to create. And Stoke managed to snatch one on the break. Nice goal, to be fair, from Sam Clucas. Coventry almost snatched it at the death as well, but James Chester was on hand to go ahead and clear that. But ultimately it wraps up what has been really quite a good season for Coventry. Their highest league finish in the last 16 years, a club which is continuing to build in the right direction. And for Stoke, more of the same really. Their 4th consecutive bottom half finish in the Championship, which, of what is generally expected of Stoke at the start of the season, the squad that they have at their disposal and the spend on this team, the wages they've been giving out over their time in the Championship as well, compared to what they're up against in this sort of region of the table, is ultimately another really disappointing year for them. We got to see Mark Warburton signing off from QPR with all 3 points as they managed to get their way past Swansea. Ilias Chair and Andre Gray linking up for the winner in the 80th minute in this one. Swansea did have the ball in the back of the net, but that one was ruled out for what looked to be quite a tight offside call. But a few players, I think, maybe on the beach for Swansea, dare I say it, in this one, they've not had anything to play for quite some time actually, to be honest. QPR ultimately finishing 11th, which is disappointing given the expectation and the way things had unfolded for them in the first half of the season, but things didn't quite materialise as they would have wanted in the second half of the season. Despite that though, you know, we got to see from the scenes at the end all the QPR fans very much sending off Mark Warburton with their best wishes, and be interesting to see where both QPR go from here and Mark Warburton, because dare I say it, I think that there's quite a few clubs in the Championship who right now, I think, would gladly swap their current manager with Mark Warburton. So I certainly don't think that he'll be short of offers, and it'll be interesting to see where he next pops up and what QPR decide to do, because there's no doubt it's a really talented group of players that they've got at their disposal at the moment. It just maybe is in need of someone else to take them over the line. But yeah, big summer coming up for both QPR and Swansea here. West Brom ended the season on a positive note, but I think that both sets of fans will be glad to see the back of this season, really. I think that Barnsley squad has been mentally checked out for quite a while, I think since their relegation was confirmed, really. But 4 goals from West Brom in this one. They were 2-0 up at half-time. The pick of the goals, probably Adam Reach's goal. Such a simple ball over the top from Button into Reach, who just lobs the unrushing goalkeeper. But Barnsley at 6s and 7s at the back. Colin Grant had the opportunity to claim his hat-trick, but couldn't convert one of his penalties, so had to settle for the brace in the end. Frustrating really, I think, for West Brom, because they showed at times what they're capable of in terms of some of the attacking edge in the final third in this fixture, but ultimately falling to a 10th placed finish in a Championship season where I don't think this league has been the most quality this season compared to, you know, previous years gone by. That's a gross underachievement from West Brom, and dare I say it, the biggest underachievers of the Championship this season, considering what was expected of them coming into this season. They'll go ahead and attempt to rebuild over the summer with Steve Bruce at the helm. I still have my reservations over how I see that all unfolding, but time will tell how they do their business over this summer. But there's no doubt a massive job on both West Brom and Barnsley's hands going into next season, because so much was wrong with both of their campaigns. There there we have it though, guys. This was the final Championship roundup of the season. Thank you very much for sticking around throughout the season, guys. It's been a fantastic year of Championship content, all the drama and talking points that we've had to go through over the years. Still plenty to come on the channel as well. Got loads of videos coming out over the next few weeks. We've got all the previews of the playoff games coming up, which should be absolutely fascinating, reflecting on some of our predictions from the start of the season, which is always interesting as well. But as always, guys, if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.